building a different relationship with shame. So shame is central to a lot of our experiences, and there's some things that we understand about shame, but what tends to happen with shame, given it's a very shut down response, it's like it's a really heavy feeling of I need to make myself small so that the group will let me back in. I need to make myself as non-threatening as possible so that the group is going to allow me access to resources, connection, anything like that. So we want to really calibrate shame to things that are appropriate and look at where we might have mislaid or misplaced our shame. So for instance, if we learned something growing up in childhood that we figured we needed to make ourselves small and shut down and kind of give our energy away in order to be reunited with a tribe again, that might have been true, that got us to survive past childhood, but now it's maybe no longer true, but we're still acting as if it is true, and now it's kind of having a detrimental effect on our lives. So talking about shame first, and then narratives built off that shame. So shame finding a way to show up. It's like finding an outlet for that shame. So I feel this sense of shame or guilt, and these are very kind of tightly woven emotions, but it's just there, like it's resonant in my body, and then I'm going to look for a place to put it. I'm going to look for a story to justify it, and that's what the brain essentially does. It will kind of create a narrative to fit what's already being felt. So what we want to be able to do is to build a different relationship with shame so that it doesn't show up in our lives in ways that are detrimental. And that, like, so much of the work that I've done over the years through therapy and coaching, all these different modalities, has been to like eat into that unprocessed childhood shame. Because what happens with shame is when it gets encoded, like when you feel that visceral sense of shutdown, if there isn't that sense of connection close by to it, that sense of connection just after perhaps you've felt that experience of shame, so you can let it process and move through the body, it kind of stays stuck in your system, and then it gets buried very deeply as life keeps happening. And then it starts to become kind of part of your core identity, and you will build and do things that will try to push and pull you away from that shame. But it's like there's a polarity that pulls in two different directions. Here is the shame, here is me trying to get away from the shame. And that kind of creates this momentum. And there's this great expression that I learned from Dr. Ian McGilchrist in a discussion. He was talking about how whatever gets produced is orthogonal to the tension between 2 points, basically. And you could think of that kind of like a bow and arrow. So you pull the string, the tension towards these two ends, and then the arrow flies outwards. And that reconciles with a version of what you might call polarity, where you have these 2 points, and then you have, like, the further away they are, the bigger whatever gets created in the gap. It's like you pulling it out sideways, and then the reality stretches in the gap. So you might see people's whole identities built around this idea of I'm trying to get away from that childhood shame, and everything they've done has been to try to rectify this feeling of shame. So there is like a creative element to shame, and the reaction to shame creates things. In my experience, whatever you create from a certain energy or in reaction and opposition to that energy is part of the same thing. It's like whatever we start to create from lack is always going to end up creating kind of more lack. Like there's a similar creation. So if we can start to work through shame, which is essentially a kind of a shutdown, collapse type response, and then start to create from a place of sufficiency, a place of enoughness. But there's quite an important part, I think, of the journey to go through that. I mean, what do I know about it? But it seems like there is an important part of the journey to go through creating something in opposition to the thing, and then kind of integrating and pulling the whole thing together. Anyway, that's all said in service of us wanting to build a different relationship to shame, and wanting to bring shame from the past, these really intense feelings of shutdown. It might be like a really intense feeling of, oh, I can't, I'm completely helpless, very vulnerable, very hard to sit with that kind of a feeling and feel it. You have to build a lot of presence around it, and it might be coupled with a high tone of I have to do something now, this is really, really dangerous. When you have to do something about it now but you can't because you're helpless, that's one of the most terrifying experiences that you can have. So we're going to start to tap into this shame a little bit and just start to gently eat away at it and erode it and digest it and titrate it and start to release and liberate some of the energy that might have been held by our shame stories. Okay, so whenever you're ready, take a breath, hand on the belly, hand on the chest. Start to tune in, start to connect with the body, start to feel what you're feeling as a bodily experience rather than just the narrative in the mind. Feeling what you're feeling, noticing where the breath is, noticing what the rhythm, the pace of your experience is, whether it's a high-pitched, high-toned, high BPM experience or whether it's something lower, slower, shut down, can't mobilize any kind of energy, or if it's something that feels like both of those things together. Or if you come to this video in the very fortunate position of feeling completely relaxed, open, connected, but typically that's not why people would arrive here. So notice what you notice where you are, feeling, sensing, just sinking and relaxing into that bodily experience. And you don't have to stop the mind, you don't have to quiet the mind. The mind might be very loud and noisy, but you're looking at the texture and the tone of those thoughts and tracing them back down to what's happening in the body as those thoughts move through the mind. And all you're doing is dilating your perception, dilating your perspective, relaxing and loosening your grip on those thoughts just by noticing. Just by noticing without trying to push against or pull towards. You're just noticing. That's our practice. And then whenever you're ready, we're going to tap around the beginning of the eyebrow. All this shame. All this shame. All these deep feelings of shame. And all these stories I have to justify these feelings of shame. All these shame stories. All of my shame stories. They feel so painful. I've worked so hard to try to get away from them. I don't want to feel shame. I don't want to feel this expanding sense of terror, coupled with a shrinking sense of I need to make myself small. I don't want to feel the pressure that that creates. It's like having my foot on the gas with this expanding sense of terror that I might be kicked out of the tribe, that I might not have access to resources, that I might be left in isolation and end up all alone. Coupled with a sense that I have to make myself so small and so non-threatening that they eventually accept me back into the tribe. That the people around me accept me again. It's like having my foot on the brake and having my foot on the gas. It's really, really exhausting and burning so much energy and getting myself absolutely nowhere. All these deep feelings of shame. They've been with me for so long. They just feel like who I am. They feel fundamental to who I am. And I can't imagine myself without them. I can't imagine what life will be like if I didn't feel ashamed of something. In that way, shame is like my protection. It's trying to protect me from screwing up. It's trying to help me be accepted. Into a group or with a situation that might not exist anymore. And I want to build a different relationship with shame. Because when I understand where it comes from, and I understand its motivation is protection, despite how uncomfortable and debilitating it sometimes feels, I can start to calibrate it properly in my body. I can start to recognize that the feeling itself is not the same kind of threat it was when I was small, helpless, and dependent. Because now I'm big. And I'm not dependent on the same people's love. And although I might carry the same brain entrainments, perhaps there's something in me that might feel ready to let some of this go. And that could feel really uncomfortable. If I've been holding onto the edge. And then I let go. The first feeling I'll feel is terror. And that feels so uncomfortable. But I know I can survive that. Because as I sit here watching this video, as I sit here noticing the space around my body, as I sit here inhaling and exhaling, as I sit here, right now, in this present moment, watching and listening deeply to all of the things that I'm feeling, all of the things that I'm sensing, all of those really heavy things, things like shame, seem to drain my energy, that are actually trying to conserve my energy and act as a kind of damage control. To stop me from getting in any more trouble. As I sit here and notice all of this stuff happening, can also notice that at this moment, I'm actually safe. Physically right here, right now. Although it might feel uncomfortable, I'm actually safe. Safe enough to sit with my feelings. And safe enough to breathe into them. And safe enough to move with them. Safe enough to feel the uncomfortable things I need to feel. So I can let them pass. And they no longer stay stuck in my system. And I might have a lot of feeling to do. I might have years and years of input. Years and years of feeling. That needs to be acknowledged. That needs to be sat with. That needs to be felt into. That needs to be breathed with. That just needs my presence, my care, and my attention. It needs warmth and needs love. And I might have all kinds of stories about why that's not possible. About why I don't deserve it. And maybe I could start to recognize those stories as stories propagated by the shame itself. Stories trying to tell me that I have to be small so I can get the love from the other people around me. But I can let love in right here, right now. Because I'm not looking at the stories as if they were actually true. Even though I might experience them that way. I can be willing to let go a little bit. And I can be willing to feel the feelings and change the narrative myself. And the good news is that I don't have to do it all at once. This doesn't have to be a one-time hit. And I don't have to do it perfectly. And I don't have to get it all gone at once. I can just keep gently working on it. Day by day. Re-educating my system. First by connecting with the feeling, and then by correcting the narrative. Connection before correction. If this was a child that felt a lot of shame and pain, really needed love, would I be willing to be with that child? Maybe that's a good way to think about it. Maybe these parts of me just don't know any better. And they haven't known any better for a long time. And that doesn't invalidate all my feelings of frustration. There's enough space for those too. And I can sit with those as well. Feeling what they feel like. Being very attentive with them. And just receiving their stories. Listening between the words to the energy that's driving them. Because the reality is, that's just my nervous system. Moving between states of shutdown and states of urgency. Urgency that might sound like, I have to do something about this right now. An urgency that might sound like, I have to get away from this. Or urgency that might sound like, I have to fight this. Or shut down that might sound like, I can't, I'm helpless. I'll never be able to do it. Things are always going to be this way. All of these stories and narratives are really just reflective of the state of my nervous system. And when I address that directly, by staying right here, right now, and connecting with myself exactly as I am, that's when energy can really start to move. And that's when I really start to notice that the quality, texture, and tone of all of my thoughts, all of my justifying stories, really starts to change. So I'm willing to be here right now and notice what I notice, and commit to myself that I'm going to show up. And teach my system a different way. That it's okay to be who it is. That it doesn't need to hide anymore. That was then. And this is now. And as I keep reiterating that message, my system's going to start to feel safe. And as it starts to feel safe, everything starts to open up. And as it starts to open up, the world might look completely different. And it's okay that I am where I am. People go through things all the time. I didn't know what I didn't know. But I can practice this. And I'm willing to practice this. Because maybe it would be worthwhile. And I'm releasing all my emotional attachment to any of the shame stories that say it might not be worthwhile. I would rather feel the short-lived fear of letting go than the long, insidious pain of holding on. That's my commitment to myself. And now I'm willing to show up. Body, mind, and spirit. Deep breath into the belly. Take some breaths together. So breathing in through the mouth or the nose, like whatever feels comfortable for you. For these kinds of things, I tend to prefer the mouth, but we'll breathe in together into the belly, fill the belly, and then fill the chest. One more. Roll the neck a little bit. Feel what you feel in the body. Stretch out. Yawn if you want. Shake your hands. Looking around the room, noticing where you are. Alright, so you can practice that as many times as you want. The more you iterate these meditations or these tapping meditations, these tapping sequences, the more your system is going to start to attune to this message, and the more you'll be gently releasing all of the resistance to understanding that, oh, this is actually reality. Like when my nervous system feels safe, the world appears and manifests very, very differently. I notice things differently. The way that I filter what's happening appears differently, and then my responses become very different. And it's just creating a little bit of space in the system so you can interpret things a little bit differently. Obviously, if you're in shutdown mode, survival stress mode, the world's just going to manifest in a completely different way. And then you will generate stories about the way the world is or the way that I am that might not be true. They're just reflective of your bodily experience. So give that a go, see how you get on. I'm open to comments, feedback, anything like that. If there's anything else you want me to cover, please do let me know. Thanks for watching, and I wish you all the best. I'll see you soon.